Do you grow up dreaming about committing a terrorist or attack?
What is so negative about having people around that will support you when you need help?
Because the last thing that the world needs is more people like America. So, welcome back, everybody. I have Sami El Harbi with us all the way from Saudi Arabia. We're going to be talking about some of the contrasts and the myths of Saudi Arabia here in the West. What is real and what is fake out there? Sami, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for a living over there in Saudi, and you lived in the United States and went to school here as well.
Yes, uh, I'm a linguist and I'm a faculty member. I am a lecturer right now. I also have done like my PhD or part of my PhD in Delaware at the University of Delaware. I've done my master's at the UK, or sorry, in the UK.
Let's start there on the education thing. In the United States, there is no such thing as subsidized education at the higher level, especially. So, over here, you have to take a student loan or you have to work 2 or 3 jobs in order to make it through university. But in Saudi Arabia, which is a kingdom which shares the wealth with its citizens, how does it work for higher education? Like, for say you wanted to get a PhD or something like that, and you wanted to do it like you did in a foreign country, like in the United States. How did that work out for you?
Actually, higher education from like college level, it's totally free, and there is a stipend for every student. I guess it's about $250, something like that, each month. The higher education, let's say postgraduate degrees, the masters and PhDs, have been or had been free for a long time, except for the last couple of years or so. It has been like paid, but it's largely subsidized. I think it costs a year about for the master's degrees something like $4,000 or something like that.
So you pay, like, if you want to get your master's or PhD, you pay like $4,000 a year, and then the government pays the rest.
Correct.
I mean, that's still a huge savings. I mean, if you do that in the United States, you're paying, 2 or 3 times that, no help from the government. And in fact, the government will, like, they'll give you a student loan, but then they charge you crazy interest on it. So you end up just perpetually in debt after your graduation in the United States. There's a lot of things going on and changes in Saudi Arabia. You're a
Correct.
little bit younger than me. Well, a lot younger than me, actually, because
Well,
I'm almost 50. But there's been a lot of changes in Saudi Arabia over the past 20 or 30 years. Modernization, a lot of AI and robotics engineering going on, media, etc. The Vision 2030 by Crown Prince bin Mohammed bin Salman, right? He wants to really bring Saudi Arabia into the digital age. What kind of changes, just as you've grown up in Saudi Arabia, have you seen infrastructure wise and digital wise? Compare that to your time in Delaware. Who do you think is more advanced in that? Do you think it's, in just an honest opinion, do you think Saudi Arabia is now becoming more advanced in the United States, or is the United States still have a leg up on Saudi Arabia right now?
when I came back home and I would tell people that some of the paperwork we would still do through mail, no one would have believed me. Everyone here thinks like we're at the US, like everything is more advanced than us. What I experienced is the reverse. I guess you can see that when you go to the DMV and try to do some paperwork and you get some mail billed to you or some bills mailed to you. Sorry, we have that all like in one or different apps in here. Like nothing, it has to be something very serious to get you out of your house to go somewhere to do it. You can do almost everything like government wise digitally right now. Taking into considerations all the new ideas and being open minded about invention, suggestion, new protocols, new way of government. I think that made everything improve very quickly very unexpectedly.
Yeah, because I mean, it's really changed. I remember, just 30 years ago, having satellite TV was like a big deal in Saudi
Yeah,
Arabia, right?
I remember
And
that.
now everything is high tech. The Saudi government, and this is kind of true with all of the Gulf states, where they've invested a lot of the oil money back into the country and modernizing infrastructure, all of these things. Whereas in the United States, we still bicker at the government level as to, whether we're going to, I don't know, spend $1 trillion on the military or if we should fix a bridge. Like, you should probably fix the bridge so people, can drive on it. But we still have such a huge problem of fighting back and forth with the government and inefficiencies where, and we'll get into this in a bit, kind of the pros and cons of having a monarchy versus a democracy, right? So there's going to be pluses and there's going to be minuses for both systems. When you have a monarchy, you are able to get things done a lot faster because you don't have all of the infighting from the parties, which you have in a democracy. This is kind of the reason why we've seen China rise so fast in the past 30 years, is because they have a uniparty, a single party, and so they're able to draft these long-term visions of infrastructure and development. Where the United States, every single year, our government's debating on whether or not to shut down the government or to fund it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but obviously, with democracies, there are some pluses there that is more than in a monarchy. Where with a monarchy, it's one person basically is making the final decision for everything. Where in a democracy, the citizen has more say. The tradition in Saudi Arabia, going all the way back to King Abdulaziz, and even before that, going all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, of the Shura.
I have to give some background, a prerequisite for what I'm saying. All tribes, the last name in Arabic, are always, or sorry, mostly blood lineage. So that's is literally the grandfather of everyone, except for some cases where some sub tribe would break off some tribe and joined another in an alliance. Then that sub tribe who doesn't belong in blood but still in alliance would take on the last name of the new tribe as well. And that happens sometimes. System of shura, I think it's necessary for any system of government. The final saying with one man has been, I think, in throughout the history of Arab tribes, that there have been always one man who was known as the Sheikh. The government started, it was an initiative by the Saud family, therefore Saudia, to join all tribes in a mega alliance, let's say. And that would have a lot of tribes don't like it, of course, because why would you join and like give up all the independence? Because that's the reality of the Arab, Arabian Peninsula throughout history. Like tribes would fight with like would live independently in isolation and sometimes in alliances. But this idea was new. It was foreign. The idea of country, let's say in the modern sense. Some people like didn't like it, but a lot of people liked it a lot because it has something religious motives in it, and it was to bring people back to the righteous path, which is the Sunnah and following the Sahaba and the Prophet, peace be
Yeah.
upon him.
And that's why a lot of people in the West, they look at, countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, all of these are monarchies. And everybody in the West always thinks that their system is better than everybody else's. So all you guys have to become democracies. But then when, if you're looking from the outside in, you look at the democracies and the dysfunction and the infighting and the political hatred. I mean, we have political violence and all of these things that's happening here in the West that you don't typically see in the Gulf state monarchies at all. Even if you look at some of the other Arab countries that are so-called democracies, but they're really not. Their elections are extremely fraudulent. There's all this infighting all the time
Yes,
and political strife. But then when you look at the Arab monarchies, you don't really see that. It doesn't mean everything is perfect. No system would ever
of
be
course.
perfect when people are involved, obviously. But, and I'm not saying that the United States should become a monarchy because we would probably just end up with a bad one. But I would say that, a lot of people in the West have this misconception that everybody in Saudi Arabia must be oppressed because you don't have democracy. So the question is, do you feel oppressed living in Saudi Arabia and being a Saudi citizen?
No, and I haven't met any person who have felt that way ever. And I'm 30 years old, so I'm not young.
In the West, Saudi Arabia gets a lot of criticism for human rights stuff, particularly women's rights, etc. And this is one thing that people fail to realize is that Islam gave women rights that in Christianity in Europe they had none, right? So in Christian Europe back in the 1,000 years ago, women weren't allowed to have their own property. They weren't allowed to own a business. They were the property of their father until they were married, and then they became the property of their husband, which is why they took their husband's last name, just like a slave would take the slave master's last name. Women had no right to vote. They basically were chattel. And in Islam freed them from all of that. And so, in Saudi Arabia, the Islamic system is still very much in play of everyday life in Saudi Arabia. To my understanding, all my people that I've talked to in Saudi Arabia have said the same thing. So women in Saudi Arabia, particularly, is an interest for whatever reason to people in the West. Obviously you have a mother. I'm sure you have female relatives, etc. Do the women over there feel like they're oppressed, or do they feel blessed to be in a country where the government shares the wealth, makes sure everybody has free health care, education, even for girls? Girls have education, higher education, just like guys,
Yeah,
right?
definitely, yes. Every citizen, without exceptions. And no, definitely they don't feel that way at all. I think that some women uh, everywhere, like even in the United States, feel oppressed. Like that's general, but nothing here that's really relevant to being in Saudi Arabia. No.
Because a lot of people in the West, they look at Saudi Arabia and they think of the Taliban, right? And it's two completely different systems, right?
Yeah,
So Saudi Arabia is a very modern country. It is, a very moderate country when it comes to Islam, even though it gets this reputation for, what we call over here is Wahhabism, and that's like supposed to be this extreme form of Islam. And while the Imam Ibn Abdul Wahhab is, a revered character, he's not the only scholar in Islam. And so there's a lot of different opinions, to my understanding, in Saudi Arabia when it comes to religion. But one thing that I think is fascinating about your country is that while the Taliban has its interpretation of Islam and how to enact Islam and the government, which can be pretty oppressive in some regards, that's kind of like separated from the government in a way with Saudi and the Gulf Arab states, where, to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Islam is the governing law, but it's not like my interpretation is the only one, right? Am I correct on that? Where the courts there are, the judge himself has the ability to look at all the different Islamic law and the nation's law and come to decisions. He doesn't have to go by the Taliban law, right?
The legal system here 100% based on Islam, but it's not based on interpretation. It's based on the original scripture and hadiths. So when a legal like lawsuit is filed and the judge is making a decision, they look at the source. They don't look at interpretations. There's no interpretations that are embedded in the system. There are, however, verses from Quran and Hadith that govern the whole government and the legal system.
And so it's basically up to the judge to discover the relevant case law in Islam with the case at hand and then make the appropriate decision. There's a story that I made a video on that was very inspiring. So two elderly Saudi brothers, I believe they were in Medina. One had been taking care of his mother for years, who was old and frail, close to death. And they both loved their mother so much that they actually had to go to court because they couldn't agree on who should be taking care of her, because the one brother had himself become frail and old. And so the younger brother was like, let me take care of her now because I'm younger and
That's
stronger.
correct. Yes.
And it was just a very heartfelt story. Whereas in the United States, we tend to just throw our parents in old folks' homes and forget about them. But in the Islamic culture and the Saudi culture in particular, um, do you guys even have old folks' homes?
In the basic law, which basically an equivalent to the Constitution, it's the government's responsibility to provide free healthcare and free care to every citizen, basically. And that means there has to be those homes, nursing homes. But the culture itself that when they're old, they thrown away is not actually here, and it's not common. And if anyone like does it and people know, he will be banished. No one will like talk to them. No one will. Well, let's banished but isolated, let's say. The people you talked about, the brothers, they're actually from my tribe. They're Harbi too, and I didn't know them. I didn't know any of them. Like, but I when I saw the news and videos, people who like lived with them in the same village, they said their names, and I don't remember their names, but I remember their tribe because I'm low key proud of them. So very like disgraceful for anyone to treat their parents any wrongly, and if they do, they don't want anyone to know.
So in the United States, we went down the path of individualism, and this is kind of what democracy does versus a monarchy. So in democracy, the government's incentive is to break families apart and make
Mhm.
them completely reliant upon the state. And it doesn't matter if it's Republicans or Democrats. They both do this, even though the Republicans claim that they're the opposite, but they're not. The policies speak for themselves. And so over the past 50, 60 years, the family unit has fallen apart in the United States. And so you don't have these tribes or extended families in America anymore. And this now makes the corporations the ones in power in reality, because they are like the super tribe now. The corporations are the super tribe, and everybody else is out there on their own and struggling. So we have this tradition, like when a child turns 18, they have to get out of the house. Go. You're on your own. Go do your own thing. But that wasn't actually a thing. That wasn't a part of American culture until the 1970s and moving into the 1980s. Before that, we had like the kids would stay home. They would go to a local college. They would live with their parents until they had a career, and then pretty much really until they got married. And so you might have somebody 27, 28, 29, 30 before they move out of their parents' house. How is it in Saudi Arabia, like when a child is growing up, they're becoming an adult, but they're not married yet. Maybe they're going to school, getting their career started. Do you still stay with your parents? Do you guys stay close together and help each other and cooperate? Or is it becoming more individualistic?
I remember, like, when you ask the question, I remember my father, when I got my job, and it's a good job, so it's paying well, and I can live on my own easily. And he was like, "What? Why?" I said, "Because I can." He said, "No, you're not going, because if you're not married, you don't move." So it was something like a command. It's like something that happens always, everywhere. People here, like women, regardless of all things, they are not expected to move, pay, or do anything. Like if they want to, that's fine, but they're not expected to. Guys, they're not expected to move out, but if they're expected at least to work. You just don't stay home and do nothing. Even if he gets a really good job, even if he turns 35, they don't move out unless they have a very good reason.
Maybe that doesn't work in a lot of American families these days because the kids in the United States are so individual minded. They don't want to be around their parents. Like as soon as they hit like 13, 14, they want to be independent and think they're grown up and they know what they're doing when they don't. But in our family, that's how we've done it. So I think it's really cool that in Saudi Arabia and a lot of the other world that our American audience is probably not familiar with is how tightly connected families are and still traditional in that regard.
First, I wanted to comment about some things that you said. When you said tribal, I studied linguistics, so my PhD is linguistics. I understand these things. I noticed that there is, in the English word tribal, there is a negative connotation, like that came to my mind and to many people, that like it's backward, and that's actually programming. It's not inherent in us, because a tribal is family. It's just extended family, and the individualism made the family meet, like at the famous Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, to fight about things, about the government, about political things. They won't speak to each other, the relative in blood, because of things political, and they don't have anything to do with them. And that's not a coincidence. I don't think so. And how that's how individualism wanted to break up families, by making tribal, like the big family, looks like backward and old, while individualism is the miserable life of individualism is the modern way, or whatever.
The funny thing about that, if you look at all of the billionaires in the United States, they all have a big family.
Correct. Yes,
And they
they
all
get.
got their start because they had the support of their big family. They're the ones in
Yes.
control of all these multi-billion-dollar corporations. But they want the everyday average American to be an individual to go work for those corporations for very cheap labor, and so that they can continue to do that. So on the one hand, they tell you go be an individual, but then they're over here with their tribe, right? Look at the
Yes.
Trump administration. Look at any of
To
these
be
big
Morgan,
billionaire
right?
families. They
To be
all work
Morgan.
together. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think that the negative connotation of tribalism that has been taught to Americans and in the West for so long is a complete lie, because from the very time that God created mankind, we have been in tribes. It's how we survive. Alone,
Correct.
if you think about it, why do lions in the wild, why are they in packs? Because one lion has a hard time hunting a deer, which is more agile and faster. But when you have 4 or 5 lions in different positions waiting for that deer to come across their path, now everybody gets to eat. And it's the same thing with human beings. If we don't cooperate and help each other, then it's much more difficult, and usually we'll end up dying, right? So
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. I think that we've been sold this lie in the United States and the West that tribalism is bad and individualism is good, when it's actually the exact opposite. Because, like I said, with my family, we're very, very close. My extended family, no, because again, they're all in that individual mindset. But
Yeah.
my wife and my kids, and even some members of my wife's family, we are very, very close, very, very tight, and we cooperate and help each other to be more successful. And we have a more successful family because of that.
When you think about tribalism without any assumptions, without any axioms that you've taken from society, what is so negative about having people around that will support you when you need help, and when you can help them, you will? What's so negative about that? There's nothing. And here in Saudi Arabia, that's like something about the oppressed women that would make you laugh, I guess. Uh, Women here, they are not expected to pay for their living. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
until they marry, even if they are employed, even if they have a salary, they can like, and I know many people who do that. They will spend their salary like in 3 days, because they have a house, they have food, and they have a father or big brother who will give them money when they need to, even if they are unemployed. And so the salary is something just luxury, you know what I mean?
yeah,
The boy, however, when he's employed, he will get a bit a hard time to get money, but he can. So the default system is that always you have a back. You know what I mean? You always have a network of support, like be it socially, financially, so be it. When I think about it now women are privileged, so they're not
yeah.
oppressed. Yeah,
The United States and the Western culture used to have, as we used to be extended family and tribal, um, is that, and you see this with the billionaire families. So Donald Trump is a perfect example. He got his first investment was from his own father. So his father gave him $1 million and said, "Go start your business, real estate."
yeah,
And then his father gave him several more of these loans and investments throughout the years before his father passed away. So Donald Trump wouldn't be a rich billionaire right now if it hadn't have been for his father helping him get started. Um, and I think that nowadays it's expected that if the parents have money, the kids have to just go get it on their own.
yeah.
That's ridiculous, because that's not how reality works. More times often than not, that child's going to end up failing because the system in the United States is against them being successful. It's successful for those at the top already, but then the system's built to keep everybody else down. And so if you don't have support from your family to give you a leg up on the competition, it's going to be really hard to be successful.
Also, when you think about it, at the end of the day, if you're individual and living alone, you'll have no one around you. Even if you're successful, you'll have no one to celebrate with. And
Right.
if your family is around you, it doesn't matter like how much money you make or what certificates are like on your wall.
So let's talk about what the Saudi culture does that a lot of people in the West don't know. And if you look into this, Saudi Arabia in particular is one of the most charitable countries in the world per GDP capita, right?
Mhm.
So there is a culture both at the government level, and my understanding is, even at the local, individual person level, of being extraordinarily generous when it comes to wealth. That this is an Arab custom, it's a Muslim custom, um, and the Saudi government gives away billions of dollars every single year in charitable aid to other countries, vulnerable people, etc. What's your experience with that, and where does that come from in the Saudi culture?
I think it goes back to like Arab heritage. It is still a virtue, but it's not something that, it's not a bonus, you know what I mean? It's a standard. It's okay, it's a virtue, it's something that you would be praised for having, but you will be heavily criticized and even isolated if you don't have it. So it's a must. It's not just something uh, you can have or you can show. You have to show it. Otherwise, you will be the odd one out. Some people, if you're familiar with the Arab poetry, there is something called hijab, which is the, let's say, dissing, like the rap culture now, which is
Yeah.
negative poetry about someone. They will sometimes say something like, their door is always closed, no one will come near their house, which is basically means they don't have guests. That means they're not they're not very generous, and that is an insult in here. Also, charity has been, let's say, reinforced by Islam more than introducing it, because there's hadith to the Prophet who's what said it said إنما بعثت لأتمم مكارم الأخلاق, which means, uh, loosely translated, I was sent to complete the virtues of the Arab or something like that. It's not the Arab, sorry. Yeah, that's a mistranslation. So I think it goes far back, and it's something like the whole society shares.
I went down to Mexico with my grandfather's church, and we were building an orphanage in Baja California, which is Mexico. And it was so strange to me that everybody that we came across down there, and this is, a very poor country, especially at the time, would invite us to their homes to have bread with them and beans, and they'd make us traditional Mexican food, etc. When they had so little, and I had never experienced that in the United States. That was my first time leaving the United States, and I was blown away by that culture. And I think it's one of the things that's the saddest part of the United States is the individual mind state that corporations and the government has implemented into our culture has also made us very selfish. So
Yes.
in the United States, it is not unheard of to not know your neighbor's names. Like you could live next door to somebody for 10 years and never know what their name is because you've never spoken to them. But in the rest of the world, especially in Arab countries, but also in even Latin American countries, also in Asian countries, um, community is very big, and so you would never not know your neighbor's name somewhere like in Saudi Arabia or something like that because that just would be insane. Like, how do you not know who your neighbor is? How have you never spoken to them? How have you never invited them for dinner, etc.? And so it really irritates me when people in the United States villainize Arabs and Muslims, especially in countries like Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states and even other Arab Muslim countries, where they villainize these people. But literally, you would feed them, you invite them to your house, and you don't ask anything in return of them. And that's something that we don't even do in the United States. Um, Taking care of the traveler, I know, is a big tradition in Islam. What is it that you think moving forward, let's say over the next 30, 40, 50 years, because of technology and all of these things that have changed, do you see Saudi Arabia moving away from the traditional value system that has made Saudi Arabia such a powerful and great state in the Middle East? Or are Saudis going to be able to combine this new digital age and technology age and AI and robotics and all this while still being able to keep the traditional values?
Actually, main one of the like let's say basis of 2030 vision is to reinforce the Arab Saudi identity. We had a new ministry, which is the Ministry of Culture. It wasn't there like 10 years ago. And there has been a lot of reinforcement of the Saudi identity, of the Saudi uh, clothing traditions, and even celebrating different subcultures within Saudi Arabia. These things wasn't very commonplace like 10, 20 years ago. I think there is a move, like there is a trajectory toward re-establishing the across time Saudi Arab identity for all Saudi citizens. So I think, yes, we are going to a different version, but we would still hold on to who we are as
Yeah.
traditionally, culturally, etc.
Because the last thing that the world needs is more people like America. Because our culture is very broken over here. And I would love to see America get back to having more of the family cultural ties. And so I think it's beautiful when I see that, despite all the modernity, Saudi Arabia has still been able to hold on to traditional culture and values and not sell itself to the Western corporations and just adopt whatever they're doing, right? Still, you know, become more modern, more technological advanced, but still, your culture is beautiful. Keep it, right? And preserve
Yeah,
it.
Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, when sometimes when he has diplomatic visits or meetings, like with the Chinese people, I think the foreign minister of the U.S. also he met them in Khayma. Does it translate into tent? I guess it's called tent, but it's
Yeah.
not the typical tent that people think when they go camping. It's
Yeah, the
old.
the
Yeah,
big,
yeah,
yeah.
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 So yeah, there's like a celebration of the heritage, uh, and yeah, people are proud of it.
I mean, even like if you look at the Chinese, they went through a period with their communism to where everything was bland, like you couldn't wear any other color than gray or brown for a long time. All the buildings had to be uniform, kind of like in the Soviet Union. It was just very dull and very ugly. And they kind of transitioned out of that mindset and went back to their own cultural heritage and started building these magnificent, very amazing cities that are just it's like going to an amusement park. Everywhere you go is just exciting to see something new and innovative and different. Um, and so I think that when you look at cultures, I would wish the United States, which the United States, to be honest, it's a very young country. And so it really doesn't have its own culture. It's all imported from Europe and the rest of the world. And then corporations took over, and it's kind of almost like a corporation communism where everything just has to be bland and lifeless and all of this stuff. You can't build anything fun or exciting over here because it's not profitable. When
Yeah,
I look at the architecture in Saudi Arabia, and some of the ideas of what you guys are building over there. Um, I'm pretty excited to see the fact that you haven't again given in to the profit over beauty, right? So
yeah.
you're building beautiful buildings and beautiful cities. There's the what's it called, the city that is in the plans or it's in the works right now. It's like the big long city.
Oh, Neom.
Neom, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, how how is that project going? By the way, I haven't heard about it for a little while. Is it still going or?
yeah. As far as I know, yes, but it's far from finished.
I mean, it's a massive, massive undertaking,
Yeah, I
um,
know.
and just the technological advancements when that project is finally completed is going to be a pretty amazing. So before we wrap up, one last thing I would like to say or ask you is, because you've been to the United States before, you've gotten to meet Americans, you've gotten to kind of see our culture a little bit, and there's so much misunderstanding with the average American as to the culture of Saudi Arabia, the country of Saudi Arabia. It's always being thrown into the media as a terrorist country or a backwards country, or a Taliban style country. Well, all these things that are not true. What would you say to Americans that they don't know about your country that they should know?
We're people just different than you. We're we don't believe the same things you believe, but we're not any more hostile or aggressive than anyone else. We're we're just we're just different.
And one thing, like, we just had this tragic incident happen in Australia. And obviously, Muslims across the world are being blamed for it, as though all 1 point whatever 7 billion Muslims in the world are all guilty because two crazy people did two crazy things. As a Saudi and as a Muslim, as an Arab, do you grow up dreaming about committing a terrorist or attack, or is it you grow up dreaming about, okay, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a pilot, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be whatever. Because in America, the people that are very anti-Islam, very anti-Arab, they say that all children grow up just wanting to be terrorists. But what's the reality? Because we know that that's not the reality.
First, the collective guilt idea is dumb, to say the least, because any group of people would have a lot of blood on their hand if we think this way. Any group, no one is innocent, but like we're not like there are extremists of any group, like white people, the KKK, I guess the best
True.
at extremism, but what I would say to people who would find it easier to judge than to understand is just we have GPT now, we have ChatGPT now, and you can just ask, is it true that X, Y, Z? And he would just answer you right away. You don't have to ask anyone, you don't have to read a book, you don't have to read a long article. You can just fact check anything by AI, and you will be surprised how much you don't know.
And I would just add on to that, make sure that you watch the Daily Rumble if you want the truth.
Yeah, sure.
Well, Sammy, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate you
Sure.
spending some time with us this evening, and would love to have you back on anytime, my friend.
Sure, definitely. And maybe we'll talk about healthcare sometimes.
Yes, yes. We'll talk about more about healthcare on the next one. I know you guys are big on that, and you have the free healthcare over there, especially right now in the United States. The healthcare premiums just went up. We just did ours for our family, and the healthcare premiums jumped up quite significantly. And I know that's happening across the country right now. Thank you again so much, and I send my salam to you and your family and everybody over there in Saudi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.